next dialogue has a very simple simple topic. Security starts with strategy, but we have talked today already that in this very turbulent world where all the time you have crisis, it's very hard to have a clear strategy because you have to adapt all the time. And before talking about our region, before talking about Ukraine, we have to talk about the most hot topic in security and defense world. And it's, of course, the ongoing Gulf War that has, it's in the 24th day of the war in the Gulf region. We are far from it from a geographical perspective. But I would start from Minister Jonson. What kind of effect do you see the ongoing Iran-US war for our region? And what are the spillover effects that could affect us and are already affecting us in Sweden, Europe, and Estonia? Please, Minister.
Well, I think you nailed it yourself by calling the most hot war. It's not the most hot war for us. Our commitment to continuing supporting Ukraine is unchanged and unwavering. So we will. This is the principal objective of our foreign policy, is to continue supporting Ukraine, and we will continue doing that. Now, what we do take note of is that media attention is, of course, gravitating away towards the Middle East. Political broadband is being affected, of course. I'm thinking particularly about the possibilities for the negotiations going on now. We all want to, no one wants to have a peace more than the Ukrainians, but it has to be a fair and enduring peace as well, and sustainable peace. And I worry that the political broadband is affected by it. Of course, some military assets and capabilities might be affected. We just did cold response, and there was a strong US commitment to that. But I'm thinking particularly when it comes to the Pearl packages might be affected. There's billions of US dollars in Pearl packages for this forthcoming years, but we particularly want to invest in the Pearl packages when it comes to PAC-3s and handling the interceptors for handling ballistic missiles, and that might be affected also due to the war in Iran and connected to Iran. Just to be crystal clear, we strongly condemn Iran's attack on all the countries in the Middle East, and we are certainly very critical to that. But and I think that the third, fourth factor is, of course, how it's going to affect oil and gas prices. Of course, Europe is very dependent on predominantly gas coming out of the Hormuz Strait, and oil prices have certainly gone up, and that's important for the Russian war economy. It's very important that we keep on having heavy sanctions on Russia, so it doesn't have the ability to financially reconstitute itself now. So that would be a few of my reflections on how this war affects our vicinity and also the war in Ukraine.
Minister Pevkur, you were last week in Washington, D.C., so you definitely have the most up-to-date info and intel. What is U.S. thinking about? Do they have a long-term strategy in trying to back Iran together or end this war quickly? Or do you have the mindset that they also don't know actually what to do the next day? What will become of the situation in the Gulf area tomorrow?
Yes, well, it's good to continue where Paul stopped. Yes, it's not only the question also for Americans. It's not only the question of the military engagement in Iran, but it's also the question of the free trade. It's the question of the freedom of navigation and sailing. And this is why it's more, and also the question to the insurance companies. It's also the question of the shipping companies. So it's much more broader issue than just a military question. So this is why this has an impact to all of us, to every customer. And one of the topics also has to be raised is the prices of the fertilizers. So agriculture season is starting not only here in Estonia, but also in the United States and everywhere in Europe. So that means that when the fertilizers will be more expensive, then we'll have a clear, this will have a clear impact also to the food prices, etc. So it's much broader issue than just the military conflict. Now coming to the United States and their position, so I also asked there last week in Washington that what should be the end state, what do you want to achieve? So first, as it is also for the Israelis, to reduce or to end the Iran nuclear program, to reduce or to end the capability and capacity for Iran to produce strategical missiles, ballistical missiles, all that program. Third objective is to reduce or see less terrorism in the world. And of course, with that comes also the change of the regime, then it's very nice. But obviously, this is the most difficult part, to change the regime. It has not been very successful in Afghanistan. And we have to understand that these wars, what we see in Ukraine, what is still the most important for us, and what is happening in Iran, these wars are totally different. One is where you have basically political and economical interest, and the other one is basically the war based on religious or religion, and especially from the Iran perspective. So this is a bit difficult for maybe also US to achieve all the goals what they've set. Will it be long? My feeling and then the answers I got from Washington was that rather not. It's rather the question of weeks, not months. I can also understand that, because this is not only topic in US White House agenda. They want to get the peace in Ukraine done as quickly as possible. For two reasons. First, the Ankara summit is approaching, NATO summit is approaching. They want to show the results. But secondly, what is more important is the domestic situation. And domestically, the midterm elections are approaching, which means that it's not very good to White House to have that long war ongoing. And the third topic, or the third reason to end it quickly, is that they have still also on their very high priority list Cuba. So the sanctions on Cuba and restricting every trade and reducing every trade with Cuba is not being enough to change the situation also in Cuba. So we cannot exclude the possibility that US will have some actions also in Cuba. So then you have Cuba, Iran, Ukraine, midterm elections, food prices in US, the oil prices in US. So White House has a lot to be concerned of.
Mr. Jonson said very smartly that the Iranian military conflict is taking away attention from the bandwidth of all of these defense diplomats and ministries all around the world. And we know for us, the most hottest war is still the Ukrainian war. We know that is the existential for the European continent. What should Europe and our countries do more to keep the attention on Ukraine? To say that, yeah, we had Venezuela, we have now the Iranian military conflict. Hanno mentioned also the possible Cuban situation coming to the headline news probably in the next year or so. What should we do to still say that, yes, those are conflicts around the world, but the most important thing to focus from a security defense perspective for us is the Ukrainian victory?
Stay focused and put our money where our mouth is, I think is absolutely crucial. We have to remember the strategic objective, and the stakes are enormous. What's going to happen in Ukraine, and supporting Ukraine is an investment into our own security. Make sure that We have burden sharing also within the alliance when it comes to supporting Ukraine, so we don't become a multi-tier alliance on Ukraine support as well, because now it's being carried on the back of too few states. I am encouraged, of course, that we with the EU loans as well, but let's make sure that happens. That's absolutely, I would claim, absolutely vital for the Ukrainian military capability, because we know they have a strong defense industrial base that they can absorb those assets very, very quickly. So continue supporting them and strategic on how we communicate, and focused on showing that this is the outcome of this war is going to have an impact for a generation in Europe as well. I think that is, and our strategy is of course twofold. One is to maximize our military support to Ukraine. We increased it for every year that's passed, and then maximum pressure on the Russians, doing everything we can on the shadow fleet and on the sanction regime and so forth. So that's to contain, contrast, and constrain Russia. I think those would be my advice.
Hanno, what are your practical thoughts about to keep the attention on Ukraine?
Well, what I said also in Washington and later in the Miami Security Forum, that we have to understand that yes, for some regions, Ukraine war is not the most important war what is ongoing, but still, not only from the European perspective, but also from the transatlantic relations perspective, it is important to keep the focus on Ukraine, because every other dictator in the world is looking very closely at the moment what is happening in Ukraine, what is the end result of that. So will it be a new normality that the big one can just go to the neighbor and not even knocking the door, but just kicking the door off and stepping in with a gun and saying, hey, this is now my territory. So this is why I would say that all this defines definitely the security and the let's say defense architecture in our neighborhood here and also in the world. But on the other hand, what we have to understand that when Ukraine will not get the best conditions for the peace negotiations, then all the Western effort what has been put into that is also nullified, or it's not so effective anymore. So and obviously, this has been the main goal of Russia all the time, putting aside the military aspect, but strategically Russia has always wanted to dismantle NATO, to put cracks, or let's say that to divide Western countries. They've been quite successful. What is happening, for instance, at the moment in Hungary. So we see that, and we've heard news that they were planning to have a fake assassination on Orban to have better result during the elections. So we see that for Russia there are no limits in the toolbox, and this is strategically a huge problem for all of us. That when Russia has no limitations in the toolbox, and they are free to test everything against their neighbors, and with that also to dismantle the unity of the Western coalition, then this is something we really need to take care of. And these were also my messages, not only in Washington but also to the media. And this maybe brings the bell ringing in our brain that we need to keep pushing, helping Ukraine as much as we can.
Yeah, and debunk some of the Russian narrative around the war. I think it's important when the Ukrainians has been rather successful during the last 2 months as well. I think in both in January and February, the Russians really didn't reach their recruitment figures. They had taken more losses than they'd be able to recruit. The Russian economy has a lot of problem right now, both in regards to inflation and potential banking crisis as well. So when they do have challenges, we should also call that out as well. So to make sure that there's no narrative around that Russia is 3 meters high and that it has a great success so far. Russia has not been successful in this war. yes, Russia certainly has the initiative, and they're pressing along most of the contact lines, so to speak. But no major cities has exchanged in Mariupol and so forth. And our job and our duty is to make sure that we can continue supporting the Ukrainians so they can hold the ground in that way. And when they are successful, such as in around Zaporizhia, we should also call it out as well. So debunking the Russian narrative around the war, I think, is important, and also to go, like Hanno did, to go to the US and also explain these matters, I think is very important.
And just one more sentence regarding the information campaigns. So we see how active they are, now how they came out also with this Narva Republic and etc. So, and I had to answer to these questions also in the United States. Although that's basically a fake news. So it's a very small group, but they were able to present this as something which is very big. And now I had to answer also to the US media that, hey, what about the Narva Republic? So come on, don't talk about it. So the more you talk about it, the more attention they will get. So this informational part is like extremely important. How we can also bring, and also what Paul mentioned, that that the Russian soldier is not 3 meters tall, and etc. That when we can also fight with the fake news, and when we can fight with information, then this is extremely important. How to keep the unity and how to bring also Americans to continuously support also Ukraine.
Yeah. But a simple question to end this topic: has Russia gained from this Iranian military conflict at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. So just take the numbers. So roughly $150 million daily. What comes more into the Russian budget because of the oil prices. So they've calculated this year's budget on the level of $40-50 per barrel. So when it's now 100, so then that makes roughly $150 million daily. So this is 1 billion weekly, and this will not to go the cover of to cover the deficit of the Russian economy, but they will put that all into the war, and obviously Russia is the first one who will advise Iran to continue the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz, so because they are benefiting from this the most.
Yes.
Yeah, a year ago, Russians were more dependent on Iranian arms deliveries than they are now. Now they do licensed production inside Russia of the Shahed 136, of the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles. They're not as dependent any longer. The jury's still out of what's going to happen in Iran. Of course, potentially they have a risk of losing an important ally for them, just as they did in Syria, and they did also in Venezuela. But so far, the oil price is really important for the Russian economy. It's going to take time for them to financially recover, so this demands a high oil price over a long time for them to really recuperate. But right now, I would say they're on balance. They won more than they lost for sure. Then if I would be sitting in Tehran, I'd probably question myself how good and effective is it to have Russia as an ally, because as far as I understand, the Russians hasn't been delivering a lot of arms to the Iranian side, but and of course Russia also has connections with other of the GCC countries. So I think they're balancing quite a lot of what they're doing, but right now, of course, this so far has been working in Russia's advantage rather than disadvantage.
But we need to share also the information, from our side regarding Russia. The banking system is in a really difficult situation. The economy is struggling. In December, they lost 35,000 troops on the battlefield. In January, they lost 30,000 troops on the battlefield. February was the first month after the Kharkiv counteroffensive when Ukraine gained more territory than Russia. So Russia is not doing well.
No.
But somehow everybody is saying that, oh, they are so mighty, and then we need to be talking to them in order to have good relations, or we need to make some compromises. Well, it's up for the Ukrainians if they are ready to make compromises. But so far, when we keep that support to Ukrainians, then we see that actually it has an effect.
Unfortunately, Russia is very good at lying and persistent lying. And unfortunately, that lie travels around the world pretty fast. Let's put the Iranian military conflict to the side and let's jump into our region. The Baltic Sea has had a lot of hybrid activities in the last years. We have seen cable gutting. We have still a big ongoing shadow fleet presence here, and also some incidents with the shadow fleet. But we have boosted our presence here with NATO exercises, NATO missions, and also our own presences here, more vocal and more consistent. But as Hanno, you mentioned, Russia, he chooses all of the tools. He's very agile in bringing new tools to the table regarding hybrid warfare. What more could we expect from Russia in the Baltic Sea region, or have we done enough as an alliance, as regional partners, that there isn't anything to do for Russia here?
Well, first of all, absolutely. For Russia, the Baltic Sea and the Finnish Gulf are vital. So it's like extremely important for them to keep it free, and it has for Russia even more importance than we take globally the Strait of Hormuz, because Strait of Hormuz from or through the Strait of Hormuz there are like 20% of the oil export. But when we take the Russian oil export out from Russia through the sea, then through the Finnish Gulf and Baltic Sea goes 60% of the Russian oil. So obviously they are like doing everything they can to keep that line open for them. And we see on the contrary that Ukrainians trying to reduce that capability from them, because we heard from the news today during the night, Ukrainians attacked the Primorsk, which is on the other side of the Finnish Gulf. And definitely we also saw that the Ukrainians attacked the Ust-Luga port. So for sure we can be like very sure that they are planning again different, the bloodlines of Russian economy. So this is why what we can expect is that yes, the Russian presence in the Finnish Gulf and Baltic Sea will be maintained quite strong. They will probably guard and escort the Shadow Fleet vessels. With that, they are also confirming that the Shadow Fleet is directly linked to the Russian economy and the Russian government. But of course, officially they are not saying anything. Probably, we cannot exclude that they will continue also with some kind of hybrid actions. Doesn't matter if it is on cables or whatever, but we need to be very vigilant here, and then we need to have better cooperation. And this was one of the things we discussed also today in the morning before coming here with Paul.
Minister Jonson, Hanno mentioned that Russia has said they will escort the Shadow Fleet vessels with military vessels in the future. How should we react to that if that really happens?
Well, we've been interdicting 2 vessels now in the last 14 days in order of our Coast Guard, which were, according to a prosecutor, most likely belong to the Shadow Fleet, and we are aggressive. We're pursuing this much more aggressively in order to, based on our strategy to constrain and contest and contain Russia. I think it's necessary. In the end of the day, of course, if they're going to be escorting all these civilian vessels, that's going to be a tall order for the Russian Baltic Fleet, and then they're going to operationally have a lot of challenges on their hand if they feel it's absolutely necessary. Just going back to the main point, of course, which I think is a little bit underassessed and undervalued, is the main inflection point where Russia meets NATO. That's in the Baltic Sea. And as you started off saying, the security dynamics here have fundamentally changed over the 3 or 4 years. We live very closely to this area, so for us, it's we've been following this incrementally, but I think it deserves more attention within the alliance. I know there's a lot of focus now on the alliance on the Arctic and the high north, and we've been a loyal trooper there, sending our army rangers to Greenland, and we've been doing air policing over Iceland and doing also in connection with Greenland. But the tension on the Baltic Sea is very high right now, because we also see a more assertive behavior by the Russian Baltic fleet, where they have their vessels and how they're acting against us and other allies. So we strongly welcome Baltic Sentry. We think it's very important to have a presence on the Baltic. I would like us to be even more aggressive on this GNSS spoofing, which is systematic, which we see right now. I know there has been some Russian military units who's been sanctioned or used on the hybrid toolbox. We should be doing more of those things as well. And of course, we know that the Baltic, that the sea lines of communication, this is becoming more important for Russia, because there are some constraints on how it can use the Black Sea as well. So more focus on the Baltic Sea, being more agile when it comes to active on the shadow fleet, and not just inside the Baltic Sea, I want to say, but also outside the Baltic Sea. I expect more to do more, and I think there's encouraging signs there in regard to the JEF. We also need to work more with unmanned systems. There's something called Task Force X, which SECT is pushing, and make sure we have the legal framework to use autonomous systems on the Baltic Sea as well, to get technology working our way. There'll be some of the things I would like to see for us to step up activities and push back some of the assertive behavior we're seeing by Russia right now.
Hanno, our region and all of the NATO allies are always, now we are putting this amount of money into defense, we are buying these new capabilities and so on. But how do you improve our strategic posture in this hybrid warfare? How can we be effective against Russia in this hybrid warfare? Because that has been the case for the last decades, that Russia is doing something hybrid. We know that we don't have a toolbox to react to a hybrid attack against us, or do we?
Well, actually, we have. And when you talk about the hybrid warfare, I thought about that for long. And then actually, the hybrid warfare has been there always. When you go to spies, the task of the spies was to unconventionally either to collect information or either to conduct some operations. So when you take even Mata Hari, or when you go back in the history, then we had the hybrid warfare actually already there, but we didn't say that it's hybrid warfare. It was just, and also when you take 2007, the big first state-orchestrated big attack on the cyber infrastructure or IT infrastructure, when Russia conducted the attack on Estonia, then this was not called that time the hybrid warfare. Today we are talking that cyber attacks are also part of the hybrid warfare. So obviously we are responding to these attacks constantly. But the point is what I also mentioned, that as the FSB and other Russian services do not have any limitations, then this makes it difficult, because we in democratic countries, we respect the law. We say that the rule of law is something we really respect. And now we have one adversary who doesn't care about the toolbox, who doesn't care about the regulations. So they don't care that the Shadow Fleet vessels actually belong to the Russian government, belong to some kind of country who is somewhere in faraway distances, or they don't care about that they can attack Mr. Volkov, associate of Mr. Navalny in Lithuania, or they don't care about attacking the energy grids, etc. So this is why it is very, very difficult to respond when you know your enemy, how they attack. So when we know that there is a conventional attack with the mass army, then is one way to respond it, and also to deter. But to deter the hybrid attacks, is extremely difficult because you don't know from where the attack comes. Is it balloon, hovering over the Vilnius airport, or is it a drone somewhere in neighborhood of Copenhagen airport, which closes the airspace? So, and we saw that also here in Tallinn a couple of days ago or yesterday. So you always have something new, which and sometimes, unfortunately, you cannot also point the finger and attribute that to someone because you don't have the clear proof. So this is why it's very difficult to respond. But to talk about tools, do we have them? Yes, we have. We have the possibility to intervene also on the sea. We have the possibilities to take down the drones, etc. But the difficult part is that also we have to obey to the regulations and to the laws. So and sometimes in the war it's a limitation, especially during the peacetime.
Minister Jonson, how comfortable are you with the allies' toolbox against hybrid warfare?
Probably room for improvement, but we're catching up quite a lot. Our objective, both when it comes to kinetic threats and non-kinetic threats, is to become a really hard target. Resilience by denial. And that forces us to make sure that we have all the laws and regulations in place in order to assure that we don't get foreign direct investments into our critical infrastructures, that it's difficult for a state actor with intelligence connections to buy property in the Swedish archipelago, to make sure that we have a public that is aware about and cognizant about these threats and so forth, building a little bit on our resilience model, actually on the total defense concept, which we have as well. So, and then of course making sure we have the right institutions, we have a special minister designated against hybrid threats or hybrid warfare, having the National Security Council and National Security Strategy, whole of government and whole society endeavors. I think that is some of the things there, and then very extensive collaboration also on the international basis, particularly on the EU hybrid toolbox I was referring to. It was good that we used the EU hybrid toolbox in order to sanction the 142 electronic warfare battalion in Kaliningrad, which has been done, and stepping up activities like that, I think, are some of the measures that we've been doing in order to counter hybrid operations. Because what we do see is that Russia has a propensity to take greater military and political risks, and we also see it when it comes to hybrid operations. They're doing some hybrid operations now that the Soviet Union did not consider doing during the Cold War, especially when it comes to some of the more kinetic elements that Poland and Lithuania has been exposed to, and the UK as well.
Mr. Jonson, you mentioned the total defense, that is very, you have built up a total defense strategy for Sweden, because we know that you can have capabilities, you can have platforms, but at the end of the day, it's important what the society can sustain in case of a crisis. How have you built that from a Sweden perspective?
By investing decades and decades into that, and you don't have to spend decades in order to do it. So you can catch up by I think maybe looking a bit on our model and looking on the Finnish model. I think previously Finland provided the gold standard when it comes to resilient and total defense system. So what they did, we built it up during the Cold War, and then the Cold War's over. Then we reduced military defense and almost annihilated civil defense. That was not so wise, but then we reconstructed it a decade ago, and been getting it more systematic. We invested, I think we increased our investment sixfold into civil defense as well, building also public awareness. Already in 2017, we sent out a pamphlet to 4.7 million households in Sweden. What do you do in case of a war or a crisis? And also connecting it and providing the understanding that the more prepared your society is to handle a military threat, the better prepared you're also going to be to handle a civil emergency in some sort. That there's an interconnectedness, so you get the buy-ins from the municipalities who doesn't think an armed attack is what they wake up every morning thinking about. So I think those were some of the things that how we've been organizing it, and then making sure that we have the resources in order to have a better security of supply. It's based on 12 different sectors of our society. So yeah, it worked for us, and of course working closely with what's being done inside EU on civil preparedness, and also on civil protection, and also close correlations also with the NATO 7 baseline requirements.
So you have this mindset that you should prepare for war, and because of that, you're actually stronger in the peacetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the structures are quite similar, but start preparing for the most challenging things, which is an armed attack. And then you have the basic structures in place. And then our experience is that then you're better to handle a large-scale forest fire, or we don't have so many earthquakes, but floods we do, and so forth. And the basic mechanism, there is a correlation between the two as well. All about resilience into your society.
Hanno, what is your perspective? How prepared is Estonia for a crisis or for a war?
Well, I could say that better than ever, but that, of course, doesn't help us in these challenges we still face. So, obviously, what we have done, some of the things are really good. So, but still, not all the population has been engaged. So, even when you take we have the mobile app called Be Prepared, and where you can also send, for instance, from the people's perspective, when you hear a drone, or when you hear something, or when something's not right, you can send it immediately through the application. So, or when you take also the higher civil defense courses or higher defense courses, which have been conducted already 20 years. So these kind of examples are really good ones. And I believe that also in the society, the resilience, and then this is something which has been very well accepted. And then when you take also the numbers, what we always measure, then roughly 80% of, when you take the last questionnaires, 80% of people are saying that investing more into defense is right, and also putting more than 5% into defense is right. And we don't see also much of political debate about that. So we see that this is the right thing to do. Secondly, around 65 to 70% are saying that if needed, they are ready to defend the country also with the weapon. So this is also a good result. And we had somewhere in the hall also Taavi Kotka, who started the program of Evil Eagle, which brings together all the volunteers who want to train for the drones. So in first 24 hours, they had more than 3,000 applicants, and by today, 1,200 have been already educated. So this also shows that actually people are ready to contribute if they have the possibility. So this is why these all one by one selected measures and tools help the resilience, but still we also see that also what we saw in Ukraine, that when the actual conflict starts, then still you have some challenges. People don't know where to go, from where the information comes. We saw the same during the COVID, I believe also in Sweden, that at the end of the day, you have pure, like really good mechanism in place, but then people just forget that in a second and start questioning what we need to do. So it's an everlasting work, I believe, to be done, and to educate people and to explain what you need to do, because the only way to be successful is that during the crisis you will not fall apart and you know what to do. So it's for the military the same, it's for especially for the special forces, that it's in your muscle history, if I may say so, that you know what to do during the crisis.
You have to prepare, because in a crisis, if it comes, you don't have time to then think. You already have to do the things that you have learned. One final topic before we give the floor for the audience to also ask questions from the ministers. Mr. Jonson, you mentioned also the unmanned systems, and that this is a growing part of defense capabilities. we also see from Ukraine perspective. Minister Fedorov said this is a pivotal part of their defense forces. President Zelensky has said recently that 80 to 90% of Russian losses on the front line come from unmanned systems. What can we learn from this Ukrainian war, and how can we have a possible cooperation with Ukraine to build up our defense forces like they have built their forces?
Sure.
And also the industry wise, how can we have that cooperation there?
Few things on the resilience side, which I think is very encouraging with Ukraine as well. And in order to have an endurance and have to continue to make resistance and the will to fight in society, basic functions is extremely important. And what encouraged me with Ukraine is that the postal offices are working, mail is being delivered, wages are being paid, the internet works to Starlink, the trains have a higher level of punctuality in Ukraine than in Sweden, which demands some soul searching of the Swedish infrastructure, I confess. So that's why I think working on the resilience is so important, because you preserve an ordinary way of life in order for people to support your government to keep up the fight. So that's important. On the Ukrainian industry, and we have an LOI of working on the innovation side with Ukraine, there are a few things I think are remarkably impressive and inspiring. So what happened when the full-scale invasion broke out was that the Ukrainians removed 35 laws and regulations. They deregulated a lot of their defense industry, privatized the whole thing, and went from 100 companies up to well over 1,000 companies. So what we're seeing in Ukraine right now is that the output is heavily increasing. What is lacking is equity and capital in order to increase, but we also see falling prices. And we don't quite see yet falling prices in the rest of Europe. And I'm pushing my own industry quite hard there. When we buy more, it just has to become cheaper, because because we have a big volume and scale challenge ahead of us as well when we're going to be living up to the capability targets. So I think they work very well on unmanned systems, on connectivity, on EW, on working with the transparent battlefield, space-based assets, things like that. They're developing things such as Delta very quickly. We have challenges when it comes to our own combat management systems of accreditation and bureaucracy. So that's where we have a complementary role between us and the Ukrainian industries on platforms. We know designs on platforms, we know project management, and we know how to calibrate various forms of platforms. So that's where we interact quite a lot. And on the Swedish defense industry, of course, we launched the defense industry strategy in June last year, pushing more innovation, increased production, and more cooperation. On the increased production, I do see we're working in the right trajectory, but still Russia has been outproducing Europe now for quite a long time in certain segments, which should keep us up at night, and then on in the power of examples of some of the things that we've been developing very quickly. We developed a SHORAD system called Tridon in 87 days. We did operating with autonomous swarms of drones. We did it in 1 year rather than 5 years. A lot of this is about cutting red tape and aggressively attacking bureaucracy. I think that the talent is out there, the technology is out there. The key is to get things in the hands of the warfighter very quickly. And everything we do on our Ukraine support, and so far we've done about 10 billion euros on Ukraine support, that we do in weeks and months. But when we do it at home, we tend to do it in years and decades. So learning some of the procedures of cutting red tape, I think, is absolutely crucial for us to have an agile and competitive defense industrial base also for the future. And therefore, I think what you've done much better than we have done in Sweden is just teaming up Estonian companies and Ukrainian companies. I think you and the Danes are by far the most successful in Europe, and I'm pushing my companies to do this, or the Swedish companies do the same thing as well. But we have lots to learn from the Ukrainian combat experience and also some of their scaling on and the element of competition that there is in the Ukrainian industrial base.
Hanno, what would you add on the topic of what can the Estonian defense forces and defense industry learn from the front line in Ukraine?
Well, very briefly, because we want to give also the audience a possibility to ask. First, agility. When you are not keeping the pace and when you are not quick enough, then you will not be successful. Second, definitely how to bring the prices down, and I fully agree with Paul that when the Ukrainians are able to produce one FPV for $250, then this is just a price we cannot meet today here in Europe, and not using with that the Chinese industry components, whatever it is. And third, I would bring out that not all the Ukrainian companies will be successful and will overlive after the war. So how to bring also the Ukrainian experience to work with us, because I believe that it's also what also Minister Fedorov said, that they need to cooperate with us, that to bring Ukrainian companies also here, that they can also then bring the expertise and experience to us, that how to produce cheaper, how to produce quicker, how to produce in mass, and bring that experience immediately to the battlefield. As I said a couple of times, that the main lessons learned from Ukrainian war is very simple: adapt or die.
That's a very good end to that topic. But now I would like to give the floor for the audience to ask a question from the ministers. Please raise your hand if you would like to have a question, and then a microphone is brought to you.
Everything is so clear that Taavi wants to ask.
Please.
Yeah, hi, Taavi Otka. I think there is one big elephant in the room, and it's the shadow fleet. So we are the Baltic states and Sweden, and we are around the Baltic Sea. So if 60% goes through that, why the hell we cannot shut it down?
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. It's one thing what we can do on the Swedish territorial waters, one thing we can do on the economic zones, and one thing we can do on the international waters. On international waters, there's not so much we can do at all. On our economic zones, we can use some of the insurance matters and environmental legislations, and on territorial waters, we can apprehend them. And we have apprehended them as well, and if they're going to start escorting their ships, that's going to run them down. But some of the things, I think, most of the interdictions when it comes to shadow fleets has been taken inside the Baltic Sea. Like you felt in Jaguar as well, the Russians are stepping up as well. So why don't do more things outside of the Baltic Sea as well, where the Russians don't really have any military options of scaremongering or things like that. I think that's why I would really love. I've seen the Belgians and the French acts. I think that it would be excellent if we could do things in the English Channel and in the Mediterranean as well. I think that would be a few of my remarks in this regard. Also making sure we have the same legal interpretation of what is possible, based on the Convention of the Law of the Sea, which guides our actions very diligently. Not more, not less, but Law of the Sea. That should be our guiding North Star, so to speak.
Very briefly, I believe that just there has not been enough political will for that. Because, yes, as Paul mentioned very rightly, it's very difficult to do something in the Finnish Gulf and the Baltic Sea because of the regulations. And also the Baltic Sea fleet from Russia is here. But when you can do outside of the Danish Straits, then it's much more difficult for Russia to do something. So we've seen a couple of examples, but still, one of the main topics what you can do in international waters, and that brings me to the UNCLOS, so International Maritime Regulation, that you can check always the environmental condition of the and technical condition of the ships. So, but for that you need to engage outside of the Danish Straits. So we're working on that. We see some progress, but unfortunately this locomotive is still too slow.
That was a simple question, but unfortunately not a simple answer for that just yet.
There is a simple answer, but you know that for that you need to come together all the European exactly European countries, not even the European Union countries, but the European countries, and to say very clearly that you close even La Manche, or you send a very clear signal that we will check every single ship who wants to enter to the Danish Straits. Because when it's already through the Danish Straits, then it's much more difficult. But before that, we will check everyone, and trust me, then most of the beautiful islands who are giving the flag to these ships will not give the flags anymore.
But very fast. Last question here, please, from the front.
Wojciech Przybylski, Warsaw, Poland. Question to both of you, Mrs. What did Iranians' ballistic missile shot on Diego Garcia base change in the threat perception in your countries, respective countries? What do you believe Europe's course of action would be following from that?
Well, maybe I will start and then Paul can finish. Paul, when to take purely from the threat perception perspective, not much has changed, but collectively we have to understand that as Russia does not have any limitations, then also Iran doesn't have any limitations. And now you have to see that what are the capabilities of the Iranians, and what we've seen so far is very clear that Israel, together with the US, wants to destroy all these nests, that you don't have to fight, what I've been telling all the time, that you don't fight with the birds up in the air, fight with the nests and kill and destroy the nests. So when you can destroy all the launchers, when you can destroy all the airfields, then you can take down also this capability. So this is, I believe, we have to put our focus on, and collectively, of course, we need to see that can we additionally put some sanctions on Iran or something. But from purely threat perception point of view, I believe not much has changed, because we knew also before. Yeah. And especially when the Iran conflict started on that scale, that Iran is not putting any limitations, even to attack its own neighbors in the Gulf region. So this has been maybe one of the biggest surprises, I believe during that conflict, that Iran did not hesitate to attack its own neighbors in the region where they are actually dependent on each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have very bad relations with Iran for obvious reasons. They've been kidnapping Swedes and put them into jail. We had an exchange of prisoners there. They've been planning assassinations on Swedish territory. If you read our intelligence report, you will find that they do espionage of refugees. They have very savvy IT and cyber capabilities and so forth. We don't feel any immediate threat in regards to ballistic missiles. But what we are, and I think Hanno has a very important point there, is then the importance in general of air defense and long-range strike capabilities in contemporary warfare. It's not just enough to have a shield, and we spent 5 billion euros just in 1 year building up better air defense systems, but sometimes you also have to shoot the arrow or the archer, and therefore you need also long-range strike capabilities, and we're investing in both more air defense systems and in long-range strike capabilities and deep strike capabilities.
With that answer, I would like to thank both of the ministers. Let's give a big round of applause for Minister Pevkur and Minister Jonson. And after the applause, we will have a lunch break, and then at 2 o'clock we will start the third part of our conference with the modern warfare and defense industry. But thank you, ministers.
Thank you very much.